Tokyo, one of the largest cities globally, has witnessed countless stories, some of which have traveled far and wide. Yet, one event from January 24, 1989 stands out, illustrating the chilling capabilities of human behavior. On that winter day, in the Kodo ward, east of central Tokyo, a grim discovery was made. A 208-liter drum filled with concrete was found in an abandoned factory located in a deserted lot. This ordinary drum held a horrifying secret, one that shocked the nation. The day before the discovery, two young men had been brought in by the police for questioning. Suspicion surrounded them in connection with the murder of a woman and her child. Once inside the police station, the suspects were separated and interrogated in different rooms. One of the officers, using a strategic interrogation technique, convinced one of the youths that his accomplice had already confessed to the crime. Believing this to be true, the young man revealed the location of the body. However, to the surprise of the police, the woman they were investigating turned out to be a different victim, one who had been murdered just 9 days prior. When officers arrived at the specified location, they found the concrete-filled drum. Upon opening it, a foul odor escaped, confirming their worst fears. Inside the drum, they found hair and remnants of what was once a human body. Breaking open the drum revealed the corpse of a young woman wrapped in a bag and blanket, her body showing unmistakable signs of extreme violence. She was unrecognizable due to the brutal torture inflicted upon her. Her body bore the scars of broken bones, severe damage to her internal organs, and notably, she had been pregnant at the time of her death. The violence was so intense that the young woman could only be identified through her fingerprints. This haunting case left an indelible mark on the community, a reminder of the horrors that can exist beneath the surface of even the most vibrant and thriving cities. The remains belonged to Junko Furuta, a 17-year-old high school. She lived with her parents and two siblings. Junko was known for her reserved, polite nature. In school, she was a top student, excelling in all subjects. Shy and introverted, she focused on her studies and had never been in a relationship. She avoided parties and had no bad habits. To save for her graduation trip, Junko worked part-time at a plastic molding factory. However, her limited earnings led her to seek a new job at an electronics store, where she planned to work full-time after graduation. Her routine was steady. She always returned home each night, but on November 25, 1988, she didn't come back. Her worried parents contacted the police and reported her missing. Hours later, they received a call from Junko, claiming she had run away and was staying with a friend. She quickly hung up, leaving her parents bewildered. That night, Hiroshi Miyano, a classmate obsessed with Junko, was out with his friend Shinji Minato. The two had plans to rob shops and find women to assault. At around 8:30 p.m., they saw Junko cycling home. Seizing the moment, Miyano instructed Minato to knock her off the bike. Once she fell, Miyano approached, pretending to be concerned. He offered to walk her home, and Junko, unaware of his true intentions, agreed. As they walked, Miyano's demeanor changed. He threatened her, warning that he would hurt her if she didn't comply. Overwhelmed with fear, Junko followed his commands. He led her to an abandoned warehouse where he began to assault her. When she resisted, he revealed that he was part of the Yakuza, a powerful criminal organization known for its violent activities. Scared by his claims, Junko stopped resisting. Miyano, satisfied with his control over her, decided to take her to a nearby hotel to continue his assault. Inside the room, he contacted his friends, Joe Ogura, Yasushi Watanabe, and Shinji Minato, to brag about what he had done. Ogura suggested they hold Junko captive so they could all take advantage of her. The group had a history of criminal activity, including a recent case where they had kidnapped and assaulted another young woman, only to release her after threatening her into silence. Around 3 a.m., Miyano brought Junko to a park where Minato, Ogura, and Watanabe were waiting. The group threatened Junko, claiming they were all Yakuza members and knew where her family lived. They warned her that if she tried to escape or told anyone, they would kill her family. The group decided to bring Junko Furuta to Minato's house, where they would keep her captive. Upon arrival, they immediately began tormenting and assaulting her as a group. After satisfying their cruel desires, they hid her away, taking turns guarding her. 2 days later, on November 27th, they forced Junko to call her family and tell them she was safe, in an attempt to halt the police investigation into her disappearance. Upon receiving the call, her parents contacted the police again, informing them it had all been a misunderstanding. She was staying with a friend. The authorities, believing this to be true, stopped searching for her. When Minato's parents saw Junko at their home, the young men made her pretend she was one of their girlfriends, but her distressed appearance did not go unnoticed. Still, Minato's parents did nothing out of fear. They were aware of their son's violent nature and his connections to dangerous individuals, particularly the Yakuza. Even Minato's brother knew what was happening, but none of the family intervened to prevent the ongoing abuse. What followed became one of the most horrifying cases ever recorded. Minato's house soon became a gathering spot for gangs, with members frequently visiting to further torment Junko. They beat and abused her relentlessly. By the 7th day of her captivity, Junko had been raped and brutalized more than 100 times. She was deprived of food, stripped naked, and humiliated in unimaginable ways. At night, she was forced to sleep on the balcony in freezing temperatures or made to sit in a freezer for hours. Her captors would then drag her out, forcing her to drink her own urine, eat cockroaches, and perform degrading acts for their amusement. The torture extended to inserting foreign objects into her body, including a heated iron bar. As days passed, Junko's condition deteriorated. One night, she seized the opportunity to escape while her tormentors slept. Severely injured, she crawled down the stairs and reached the phone. She managed to dial for emergency help, but Hiroshi caught her before she could say anything. He immediately hung up the phone and beat her brutally. When the police returned the call, Hiroshi lied, saying it had been a mistake, and the officers dismissed it. Following this failed escape attempt, her punishment grew even more severe. Hiroshi gathered the group, and they brought her back to the room where she was held captive. There, they mocked her, lighting a candle and burning her skin with its flame. They poured lighter fluid on her legs and set her on fire as a form of retaliation for her escape attempt. The torture caused Junko to have violent seizures, but the boys laughed, thinking she was faking it. They continued to burn her feet until she could no longer bear the pain, at which point they extinguished the flames. Despite everything she endured, Junko miraculously survived the assault. But her suffering didn't end there. They continued to beat her, even cutting her breast and piercing it with sewing needles. At one point, one of the boys decided to insert fireworks into her body, ignoring her desperate pleas to stop. By now, Junko's physical condition had deteriorated so much that they no longer found her attractive, but they had raped her between 400 and 500 times, involving over 100 men. Her body was so broken that her organs began to fail, and her stomach had swollen from the repeated blows. Her tormentors crushed her internal organs, causing blood to pour from her mouth. Eventually, her nose became so filled with blood that she could only breathe through her mouth. Severely malnourished and dehydrated, she could no longer stand. The room where she was held became a filthy cell filled with excrement and urine. Her captors, disgusted by the smell, forced her to crawl to the bathroom. It would take her more than an hour to drag herself down the stairs because of her weakened state. At this point, she was unable to walk and struggled to even drink water or eat food, vomiting after each attempt. This only further enraged her abusers, who responded with more brutal beatings. Despite the unimaginable amount of pain she suffered, the abuse continued. They used her body for their sick entertainment, inserting various objects into her, including a hot light bulb that shattered inside her. Other objects included scissors, a bottle, and burning items. One time, they smashed her head onto the floor with such force that her eardrums ruptured, leaving her unable to hear properly. Instead of stopping, they grew even more violent. They dunked her head into a bucket of water until she nearly drowned, only for her body to involuntarily revive itself in a desperate struggle for air. By the time 30 days had passed since her abduction, Junko Furuta's physical state had deteriorated beyond recognition. The repeated assaults had disfigured her face, which was so swollen that her features were barely distinguishable. Her hands were mangled, her nails shattered, and her body emitted a strong odor of decay. Junko was so emaciated that her bones were visible through her skin, and her entire body was covered in bruises. Her eyelids had been severely burned by the hot wax that her captors had dripped onto her face, leaving her unable to see. Seeing her worsening condition, the group of boys lost interest in her. They began to plan the kidnapping of another girl using the same method they had used to capture Junko. This other girl was also gang raped, but was eventually released after the abuse. During Junko's 44-day ordeal, she repeatedly begged her captors to kill her and end her suffering. However, they refused, instead choosing to continue satisfying their twisted desires. Junko, once a human being, had become nothing more than an object of entertainment to them. On January 4th, 1989, Junko could no longer stand on her own and lay immobile on the floor. The boys, wanting to amuse themselves further, challenged her to a game of Mahjong Solitaire, a tile-based game where pairs of matching tiles must be cleared from the board. Surprisingly, despite her poor physical and mental state, Junko managed to beat them at the game. Enraged by their loss, they punished her by forcing her to stand up, only to strike her feet with a heavy stick until her body collapsed to the ground in a seizure. As Junko bled profusely from her wounds, her captors, repulsed by the pus that oozed from her infected burns, covered their hands with plastic bags and continued to beat her. They dropped an iron dumbbell onto her stomach and then set her on fire. The final assault lasted nearly 2 hours, and Junko's body could no longer endure. She died that day, though her killers didn't immediately realize it. They left her, assuming she was still alive. Hours later, Minato's brother entered the room and noticed that Junko wasn't moving and appeared not to be breathing. Alarmed, he called his brother and informed him that she seemed lifeless. When the group returned, they realized Junko had died. Fearing the discovery of her body, they wrapped her in a blanket, stuffed her into a suitcase, and devised a plan to dispose of the evidence. They placed her in a 55-gallon drum, filled it with concrete, and later disposed of it in a vacant lot. 9 days after Junko's death on January 23, 1989, Hiroshi Miyano and Joe Ogura were arrested for the kidnapping and assault of another young woman. During the investigation, police found women's underwear in one of the suspects' homes. During his interrogation, Miyano was tricked into believing that Ogura had confessed to the murder of Junko Furuta. Thinking his accomplice had already revealed everything, Hiroshi told the police where they could find her body. Once the case was public, it was revealed that 2 officers had visited Minato's house while Junko was still alive. The police had received a report from a young man's parents, stating that there was a girl being held captive in the house. However, when the officers arrived, Minato confidently invited them to search the house, claiming there was nothing wrong. The officers, thinking this was proof enough of his innocence, declined the offer and left. Had they searched the house, Junko's ordeal would have ended after 16 days, and she might have recovered from her injuries. Due to their failure to act, the 2 officers were later dismissed for not following protocol. The young man who had reported the incident to his parents later admitted that Minato had forced him to sexually assault Junko. When he left the house, he told his brother, who informed their parents, leading to the initial police visit. Although no DNA from this young man was found on Junko's body, both he and his brother cooperated with the investigation. After Hiroshi Miyano and Joe Ogura's arrests, Yasushi Watanabe, Shinji Minato, and Minato's brother were also taken into custody for their involvement in the crime. However, because they were all minors at the time of the incident, the Japanese court initially withheld their names. Nonetheless, due to the brutality of the case, journalists argued that the perpetrators did not deserve any protection of their identities. While the 4 main perpetrators were held accountable, it was believed that up to 100 men had participated in Junko's abuse, as forensic examinations found DNA from over 100 individuals on her body. Junko's autopsy revealed that the cause of death was a combination of shock and trauma from the torture inflicted on her. The stress had been so extreme that her brain had physically shrunk. Junko's parents were devastated when they learned of the atrocities their daughter had suffered. Her mother collapsed from the trauma and required psychiatric treatment to cope with the unbearable details of Junko's abuse. Before the trial, it became clear that Hiroshi Miyano had orchestrated the crime. He had been obsessed with Junko since high school, frequently attempting to court her, though she had never reciprocated his advances. Knowing Hiroshi's ties to the Yakuza, Junko had always distanced herself from him. She was dedicated to her studies and uninterested in relationships. Enraged by her rejection, Hiroshi, accustomed to getting his way through fear and intimidation, had planned his revenge. In July 1990, the court sentenced Hiroshi Miyano to 17 years in prison. Unhappy with the ruling, Miyano appealed the decision, only for the court to extend his sentence by 3 more years, bringing his total to 20 years. Additionally, his parents were ordered to pay 50 million yen in compensation to Junko's family. Shinji Minato, initially sentenced to 4 to 6 years, had his sentence increased to 8 years. Minato's parents and brother, though aware of the abuse, were not charged. Yasushi Watanabe also received an 8-year sentence, and Joe Ogura spent 8 years in a juvenile detention center before being released in August 1999. Despite his release, Ogura continued to boast about his involvement in the crime. Following his release, Ogura was arrested in 2004 for a separate assault incident in which he tortured a man for 4 hours. He was sentenced to 7 more years in prison. His mother, blaming Junko for everything that had gone wrong in Ogura's life, destroyed Junko's grave, claiming the girl had ruined her son's future. Hiroshi Miyano was denied parole in 2004, but was released several years later. In 2013, he was arrested for fraud, though he was eventually freed due to insufficient evidence. Minato, on the other hand, was arrested again in 2018 for attempted murder after attacking a man with a metal rod and slashing his throat. The Junko Furuta case remains one of the most horrifying and brutal crimes in Japanese history. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.